What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Bound to Improve. My name is Landon.
My name is Chris Pound, and this is episode one.
The goal for this podcast is we want to relay our journey as we grow. We have chosen books to implement as part of this journey, and we want to pass on what we learned to you guys.
Along with that, though, we are not experts on anything, and our ultimate goal of this whole experience is to grow and progress. With that being said, at some point along the journey, we're bound to improve.
And
More of keeping each other accountable throughout this process will also help.
yeah, and a quick disclaimer before we get started. You have to take everything from what you hear about what worked for the authors and what works for us with a grain of salt. Um, what works for you might be completely different, and that's okay. This is a learning experience for all of us. So with that being said, let's get right into the first book. So the first book we chose was Zero to One by Peter Thiel. Just a quick background on Peter Thiel. He is a well-known entrepreneur, known for co-founding PayPal and Palantir Technologies, and for being one of the first investors in Facebook. He is also a well-known venture capitalist, and he is known for his contrarian thinking. I wanted to really figure out um, how to get to 0 to 1 and what that really means. Um, and so, what Peter conveyed to us was that it takes a different way of thinking to really um, transition from 0 to 1, which means creating something brand new. And many people are stuck in going from 1 to N, which is basically doing the same thing over and over. And a quick quote from the beginning of the book to kick us off is brilliant thinking is rare, but courage is even shorter supply than genius. And the book teaches the principles behind that.
To build on that, this book gave a lot of great examples of other companies, how or why they failed, and vice versa, how they succeeded and why they succeeded. And I think that really added on to the total aspect of the book in general.
And getting straight into just the overview of the book in general, I feel like the book was broken up into kind of three sections. One was personal, the other was starting the actual company, and third view was looking at it from like a venture capitalist or investor's perspective. Um, so going into some of those points is everyone today is concerned with taking things from 1 to N and doing the same thing over and over again and just not reinventing the wheel. But very few are trying to really go from 0 to 1 or creating something new. And what Peter Thiel talks about is making vertical progress and that 0 to 1 that he mentions. And going to the personal aspect, another big thing he wanted to touch on was just to think for yourself. So many people nowadays are just taking what they hear from their bosses, their mentors, and just implementing that. But if you have to be able to think for yourself if you want to grow and create anything special. And then touching on the company side of things, he talked about how great companies are really monopolies in disguise. With that being said, you have to be able to disguise your monopoly. Take Google, for example. Within the search engine industry, they take up a majority of the market share, but they claim they're not a monopoly because they also make products like smartphones. They've been trying to make cars, so they proclaim back to all of the investors and analysts and say, "Look at us in terms of this product. We only hold 2% of the market share." Um, so along with that, dominating a niche market is huge for being a special company. And I don't know,
Another
Chris, you have
great,
any thoughts?
yeah, another great example would be Elon Musk and Tesla. You know, they 4.2% of market share along all car companies, but when you really look at it, Tesla is a EV company, right? And they hold 55% of the market share, which again is a monopoly in disguise. They claim, oh, we're only 4% of the whole market, right? No, not really. You're actually 55% of your market. So in their niche, they're 55%, um, which goes right into what Peter was talking about when he says you have to disguise your company as a non-monopoly, right? Even if you are, the more you talk about your company and the more you boast, like, oh, we're all this, that gives away the monopoly in itself. And so he really hit on the fact that you kind of want to hide. You want to be the needle in a haystack, uh, to say. But like I said, Elon Musk does a great job of that, and that's why he's had the success that he has.
Yeah, 100%. And going back into the personal side of things, one of the chapters was titled "You Are Not a Lottery Ticket," and I think that's huge because you cannot let chance dictate your life. If you keep leaving it up to good luck or good fortune and you just hope for the best, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to do anything. You're never going to create anything special, and you're just not going to move the needle from 0 to 1. You might go from 1 to N, but you're not going to go from 0 to 1.
Yeah, and I guess to add on to that, a big part of the book was to believe in secrets. Um, and it took me a while to really understand what he meant by that. But the more you kind of look out, you realize that a lot of people have quote unquote blinders on, in regards to life. So they're so focused on what's going on right now, what's right in front of them. And if they were to open up their eyes a little bit, they would see other opportunities and other places that they wouldn't have even known to look. But since they're so focused on right now and what's in front of them, they don't even have the opportunity to look at these other things that are going on and go through the doors that are open. And if you're so close-minded, you'll never be able to go through these other doors that you didn't know were even available.
Just to touch on that secrets point too, is people don't want to look for secrets. Um,
Mm.
People think that they have all the answers. So if no one's out there looking for secrets, Peter in the book was saying that we're just not going to go forward as a society in general. So we need those people to look for secrets in nature, in terms of like new drugs, um, new ways of store energy, and then you also have to find those
Hmm.
people secrets.
That was a
And we
huge
need
that was a huge part was talking about the energy thing. He was bashing all these, or I wouldn't say bashing, but he hit a lot on these clean tech companies. That was like a whole chapter, maybe two chapters, and it was just kind of interesting because he uh, he was a co-founder of PayPal, this and that. But nowadays he's actually a venture capitalist, and he saw the bubble before anyone else thought there was going to be a bubble in the first place. So I just thought that was extremely interesting.
Yeah, 100%. And then last view here is from kind of inside the company. So when you're creating that new company, you have this grand idea that you're going to really take something from 0 and create something and bring it to 1. Is you have to start with a key foundation. If you don't have that key foundation, then even if you do get big, it's bound to crumble at some point.
Yeah, he mentioned, having a partner in business is important, but choosing the right partner in your business is even more important. Um, you know, there are quotes that we can say that we won't, but if a bad apple can really kill a company, and he hit on that quite well, I think.
Yeah, and then last summary point here for the book is you can't just have a good product. A lot of the engineers are really focused on just building the best you can be, and all the clients will come. But that is not the case at all. You have to have your distribution channel set, and you have to have a solid sales team because without those two things, your business is bound to fail as well.
Yeah, I think that really goes back to the strong foundation. Think about building a house. Without a strong foundation, the house is going to fall. So just imagine that as a business. Without a strong foundation, the business is bound to fail.
Yeah, 100%. Any other key takeaways, key overviews that you want to bring up?
Um, I there were lots of great quotes from this, and I think we'll hit on those in a little bit later. I think we go right into the key themes and arguments presented.
Awesome. Yeah. The first one I kind of picked out was he made a point where don't fight if you don't have to. Um, but if you are going to fight, you have to make sure you just win and do it quick. So you can kind of take this two sides. You can take this from the company lens. If you are creating a company and you have a competitor, you shouldn't fight tooth and nail with them because it's not going to get you anywhere. For example, Google and Microsoft. So they both created something that was extremely special. And but once they began competing with each other, that's when they became faulty and they lacked that new innovation. For example, um, Microsoft created Windows, and then Google had Chrome, Bing versus Google Search, and then Office versus Docs, Surface versus Nexus. It just kept going on and on. And out of nowhere, do you know what company came up, Chris?
I don't like these pop quizzes. No. So why don't you just share that?
Sorry for putting you on the spot, but Apple came up and
Mm,
overtook both of them. So,
yeah.
so you have to be really careful about competing in business.
To,
Yeah,
to add on to that, there's a saying that if you can't beat them, join them. And that's essentially what Peter and Elon Musk did. Um, I don't know who if you guys know this or not, but Elon Musk and Peter, they had two separate businesses and in the same industry, in the same market, and they were going back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And eventually they decided that, like Shakespeare said, don't fight if you have to, but if you do, make it quick and without suffering, right? They realized they don't need to fight. So what they do, they just joined together and they ended up making PayPal together. Yeah, and he also hits on the point that start small and dominate before you expand. Think about like a big fish in a little pond. You want to be the big fish in a little pond. Otherwise, you're a little fish in essentially the ocean, um, with sharks. That's a great way to put it. With sharks. So as long as you can be the big fish in a little pond, do that as long as you can, because once you're in the ocean, there are sharks out there and they will eat you. And so I think he did a great job on relaying that message in the book.
and one of the biggest things that he saw as a red flag was, oh, it's a $500 billion market, and we're going to go capture 2% of that. Trying to get that 2% is going to be unachievable. But if you create your own industry and you can take 100%, even though if you start small, that is going to make all the difference in the long run.
That's a good point.
And yeah, and then moving on, um, this is more from like the investor point of view. Um, One of the starting quotes of the chapter was "Money makes money." When he looks at other firms, startups to invest in, he uses the Pareto principle, which basically means 20% of the companies make up 80% of the value of the venture capitalist portfolio. So what does that mean? What does he look for? One of the biggest things he looks for is he doesn't invest in a company if he doesn't believe it can outperform the entire fund. And he describes this as the power law. You should be able to look for those companies that are going to take your fund and just outperform it in general, because diversifying among all the startups isn't going to produce any results because an exponential amount of them fail in the long run. So you have to be able to find those that are really going to take your fund to the next level, and you have to believe in that.
Yeah. The next point, me and Landon have been going back and forth on this one. In the book, he says to not diversify yourself, which means don't be broad. And you kind of take that a couple different ways. And that's kind of where me and Landon have been talking about, right? Would you rather be good at only one thing, or would you rather be kind of like the jack of all trades? And I think it really depends on the situation and what you're really, really good at. If you want to go into something and be an expert on that, great. But it has to be something that you're capable of being an expert at. And otherwise, you're really not going to be good at anything. And that's kind of where we feel like being a jack of all trades is essentially a good thing. Because if you're really good at multiple things, experimenting with these different things, you'll be able to find your path and find something that you can be an expert in. So I think you kind of have to diversify yourself in order to undiversify yourself, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree with you there. It's just, especially when you're young, try a whole bunch of different things, get a whole bunch of different skills, till you really find what you're passionate about and you can spend the rest of your life doing. Then use all the skills that you gained and give 110% of that. And you'll be amazed at what you can produce and what you can become.
Yeah. I think this is a great opportunity to go into the 7 questions every businesses need to answer. So I think we'll just go back and forth on this one. The first point that he made was engineering questions. Can you create breakthrough technology instead of incremental improvements, right? So, like Landon mentioned earlier, you have to be 10 times better than any other company in your industry. Otherwise, your profits are going to be cut down. So that's the first question is the engineering question. Can you make breakthrough technology?
Second, the timing question, is now the right time to start your particular business? For example, take the dot-com bubble. Thousands of people were creating companies. A new company was getting started every day, bringing in all this funding. But are you really going to be 10 times better than anything else that was on the market? Um, that's just something to keep in the back of your mind when you're trying to think of the next business to start.
Yeah. The third question is the monopoly question. Are you starting with a big enough share in a small market? Like we talked about earlier, you can be a big fish in a little pond, or you can be a little fish in the ocean. And that's kind of where the monopoly question comes into play at.
Yeah, moving on to number four, the people question. Do you have the right team in place? This goes back to the foundation and the starting culture of your business organization. If you don't have the right people, you're not going to go anywhere. Like we've been hammering home this entire episode.
Yeah. And then the fifth question is the distribution question. Do you have a way not to just create, but also to deliver? Without a distribution system in place, right? You can have the greatest product, but if you can't sell it and you can't distribute it, nobody's going to be able to buy it. And so that's a huge point that I didn't quite understand until uh, after reading the book and going back through and looking at my notes that I had taken. That it makes sense. There are lots of great. There's a lot of great technology out there, but if you have nobody to sell it and no way to distribute it, that great product will never be seen.
Yeah, definitely. The second last one here, number six, the durability question. Will your market position be defensible 10 to 20 years from now? This kind of goes back to um, being able to have sorry, we haven't even touched on this yet, but definite optimism. You have to have the end in mind. Begin with the end in mind. If you don't have that goal to work towards in the future and have that vision for yourself in 10 to 20 years, you shouldn't even start because you're not going to make anything from now to that 10-year mark. And if your 10-year mark, you see yourself getting swallowed, it's just not even worth it.
Yeah, and that brings us to number 7, and this one's kind of funny. The secret question, right? Have you identified a unique opportunity that others don't see yet? That's $1 million question in itself, right? If you have a unique opportunity that nobody else sees, you can essentially go from 0 to 1, right? But if you don't see it, other people don't see it either. However, you're not going to be able to go from 0 to 1, which would maximize your opportunity.
Like, yeah, for sure. And I just have a general question here before we move on quick. Chris, how many businesses do you think run through those questions or at least have a general answer to them when they start their journey?
Yeah, that was actually mentioned in the book, talking about the clean tech boom or bubble. All right, bubbles are going to pop at some point, and it did. Um, but he mentioned that as a VC, he had a lot of these clean tech companies coming in, and he was going down the list of questions, these 7 questions that we just went through, um, and I want to say like 90% of them or more didn't answer multiple of the questions. Right? They may have hit one or two, right? Like the monopoly, or yeah, they might have the engineering question down. They might have a breakthrough technology, right? But then it goes into the durability question, right? Will you be able to defend your market 10 or 20 years into the future? And the answer was no. And he realized that he knew the 7 questions. And so he was able to kind of defer these investments, and the bubble popped. So, yeah, that's my takeaway on it. What about you?
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I think what he mentioned was many of them might have a few of the questions answered, but they don't take real consideration into all of them. And I think you should almost have all seven answered to be able to move into that entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah. I think it's a good time to go into our personal insights and actual learnings from the book. So I'll let you take away from here.
Yeah, so just my general takeaways is everything back to the very beginning. From what we said to take away from this podcast is you have to read everything with a grain of salt. Um, this is what worked for Peter Thiel. He has extremely um, different views on how businesses operate, how humans should operate, and these views are very contrarian to society. So that was probably one of my main takeaways. But some new ideas and perspectives that stood out to me was the idea of definite optimism versus indefinite optimism. And you'll have to relay here what you think about this one is so definite optimism is having that end goal in mind, or um, yeah. And indefinite optimism is believing that you're just going to end up good. You don't know how you're going to get there. You're just along for the ride, but you know it's going to be good. And I feel like that's where I've been stuck a lot throughout my life is I've been working hard, nose to the grindstone, um, just hoping for that end result to be good, having no idea what it is. Um, and that's where I wanted to work on transitioning into that definite optimism. Um, and I think we'll touch on that a little bit later. But Chris, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I guess one of the biggest learnings I took away from the book was trying and failing something is better than not trying at all. Um, and you can kind of use that in every aspect of life, right? Whether it's business or a fitness goal. If you don't try, you'll never know what it's like to succeed. So it all goes back to trying something and figuring out if it's going to work or not, regardless of the outcome. And at a later time, trying and failing is better than not trying at all. And I also thought something that was interesting was his take on spreading old ways to create wealth around the world will result in devastation, not riches. Again, it took me a little bit to fully understand what he meant, but then you kind of relate that to real life. 80 years ago, people could create wealth by working normal jobs, but you have to look at the expenses they were incurring, right? I mean, you could buy a house on 2 years of working income. You can't do that in today's day and age. And so you really have to change the way you're thinking about how you're spending money, how you're saving money, how you're investing your money. And so it all goes back to the old ways. Yes, some of them may be able to come into effect nowadays, but most of them won't. So they're obsolete. They don't work. So that's when it comes to, again, opening up your mind, opening up your opportunities, and just taking the paths that are open to you. So I think that those were the two biggest takeaways that I had.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at
So,
it. And um,
another thing, process trumps substance, right? People who lack concrete plans to follow fall apart when they face adversity. Follow the process, trust the process, right? You're doing something because you have an end goal in mind. And the only way to do that is to follow the process. And that comes back into the uh the optimisms, right? So trust the process, follow the process, and if it doesn't work, at least you tried. So yeah, and just to add on that, something that has stuck with me since I was in high school, I had a basketball coach, and he had a saying: "Get comfortable with being uncomfortable." Right? Get out of your comfort zone. And even for us right now, this is extremely out of our comfort zone, right? But again, we're bound to improve if we continue to trust the process and continue. And so I think things just kind of come together one way or another. And so if you become more comfortable with being uncomfortable in society, you're bound to improve. So
that's awesome because that just must be a thing that all high school basketball teams did because I heard that same thing, being comfortable
yeah,
with being uncomfortable. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
So I guess moving forward here, what do you want to implement from this book? And we'll check up on this in the next episode and see if we've really implemented what we said and what's working and what's not working for us.
Like I said before, I think trying new things, and if you fail, you fail, but you tried in the first place. Um, you know, Trying new things is difficult. You don't want to be uncomfortable. But again, it goes back to if you fail, you fail. At least you tried. And so I think that's something that I'm going to try to implement, is trying something new. And there's no shame in trying something new and failing. If you fail, who really cares, right? And if someone does care, someone makes fun of you, guess what? You're already head and shoulders above those people who are making fun of you because they wouldn't try in the first place. So I guess what's something that you're going to try to implement?
I guess real quick, that's awesome, and I'm gonna hold you accountable to that next week. But you can't say this podcast is trying something new.
Exactly, right? This is extremely out of our comfort zones, right? But again, what do we have to lose? So
Nothing. Yeah, and
nothing.
then something that I was gonna try to implement was going back to that definite optimism piece. So something I wanted to try to work on is I wanted to get that end goal in mind, so I can begin with that end goal and then work backwards to see what I need to do today to be able to get to that, and just transition away from that indefinite optimism state. So I'll keep you updated if I get that plan in place or not.
Okay. I think this is a great opportunity to go into the quotes of the week.
Let's
I
do
guess
it.
our goal here is to pull a quote from the book that really hit us, and just be able to share that with you guys.
100%. Start us off, Chris.
All right. So again, we mentioned it earlier in like the very first 5 minutes of the podcast here, but brilliant thinking is rare, but courage is even shorter supply than genius, right? And it goes back into being comfortable with being uncomfortable, um, trying something new. Whether you fail or not, it doesn't really matter because at least you tried. So that was one of the biggest. Uh, that was a hard hitter for me, I think. When you think of, oh, that kid's a brilliant, but is he courageous? Probably not.
Ooh, good way to look at it.
What
Yeah.
about you?
So I have two quotes this week, and both of them kind of orient back to what I'm going to try to implement this week. So the first one is, to succeed, you must study the end game before everything else. And that was from a grandmaster chess player. And I think this kind of resonated with me a lot because, in the end, you have to know what you're working towards. You have to have that why. If you don't have that why, then you don't know what you're doing today. And I think that's something that everybody needs to think about. And the second one I had is, victory awaits him who has everything in order. Luck, people call it. And I think that again resonates with, what I want to try to implement this week, because I was looking at that end goal and working backwards, to figure out what I need to get in place now so that when I reach that end goal, I knew I had that plan. I knew what I was doing all along. So it wasn't just luck per se.
Yeah, I wasn't informed that we are supposed to have two quotes, so we'll just go on to our next talking points, and that is next week's book. So kind of right now, what we're thinking is how to win friends and influence people. So far, I'm a couple chapters in, and the insights that I've taken away from them so far have been extremely useful, and so I'm extremely excited to be able to share that with you guys. And so I think that pretty much sums up the first episode here, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And we just want to thank everybody for tuning in. And we just want to let you know, to go follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Watch our videos on YouTube.
Yeah. And the names of those are just bound to improve on every social media, bound to improve. So that's where you can find us at. Thanks for tuning in for this week's episode. We'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you again, and keep reading and keep growing.